Hey, it's Ella Hay. Today, I'm handing things over to my colleague, Doug McMillan. Doug is an investigative reporter at The Post, and he spent the past few months working on this story that, when I heard it, sounded like a living nightmare. He talked to people who say that one day, out of the blue, they were arrested for crimes they knew nothing about. Here's Doug.
This story starts with a man named Chris.
Hey, how you doing? I'm Christopher Gatlin.
Chris is 32 years old. He's a father of 4. He lives in Indiana now, but he's originally from St. Louis. And that's where he was on the day when his life changed forever.
Can you tell me about that day and what you were doing that day before this happened?
I literally just had got off work. I just had made it home. I was about to get myself together, hop in the shower, finish the rest of my day, rest up. And there was a knock on the door.
He went to answer the door. There were 2 police officers standing there, a man and a woman. And Chris told us he wishes he had never stepped outside to talk to them. The officers asked Chris some confusing questions. One of them asked if Chris had a pass for the Metrolink, the St. Louis public transit system. He said he didn't. He said he drives everywhere and he has a truck.
And after he asked that, he looked at the other officer and he nodded his head. And that's when they locked me up.
Chris says he had no idea what was going on. He didn't know why he was being arrested.
At that point, I was lost. You know what I'm saying? I was terrified. It ain't make no sense to me. It didn't.
He was taken to an interrogation room, and officers started asking him questions about this horrible crime that had taken place 8 months earlier. A security guard was attacked on the platform of a metro train, and he was brutally beaten.
He say, yeah, you down here because you assaulted a Metrolink police officer. I'm like, man, I don't know what you're talking about. He say, we got your picture right here on the... I'm like, man, you don't got my picture. Then when he showed me the picture of the man who really did it, I was like, man, that's not me.
But the officers didn't believe Chris. All he could think was, how did this happen? How did they even get his name? And if they don't believe him, how is he ever going to go home?
I was like, dang, if I'm telling you I ain't do it, and I know deep down in my heart that I didn't do it, I was like, dang, if I'm already locked up, who's to say that they not going to send me up that road? You know? I never thought I was going to get out because I ain't know where it came from. Like how y'all picked me out of all people.
From the newsroom of the Washington Post, this is Post Reports. I'm Doug McMillan, a business and tech investigations reporter for The Post, and I'm your guest host today. It's Tuesday, January 14th. Today we're talking about how police are using AI facial recognition software to identify suspects, and how that has led to the wrongful arrest of people like Chris Gatlin. Chris wouldn't learn why he was arrested until much later when he was sitting in jail. His lawyer told him a computer picked him out using facial recognition software. Officers fed a blurry surveillance image into software that scanned a database of mugshots of people arrested in the St. Louis area. It suggested Chris as a possible match. That's how I heard about this case. For nearly a year, I've been investigating the growing role of facial recognition tools in our criminal justice system. I found that police rarely disclose their use of the software to the people they arrest, and that some departments use it even when it's forbidden. I've also found that the technology is still unreliable. There are no studies showing how accurate it is under real-world police conditions. And yet, some officers treat the recommendations it gives them as facts. I've talked to several people who were wrongfully arrested because of misuse of this technology by police. Most of them were in jail for a few days or even a week. Chris sat in jail for 16 months. After that first conversation with Chris, I wanted to go to St. Louis to learn more.
Please stay safe and again, thank you for riding Metrolink.
So one of the first places we went to in St. Louis was the train platform where this crime actually took place. So we're here where it all happened. It was a really cold day in December 2020. So the security officer approached a man who was in the security booth. He told them he wasn't supposed to be there, but the man essentially refused. He said it was cold outside and he wanted to stay in there a little bit longer. In, I think, probably this security booth right here. And what happened was, according to the documents we read, that confrontation went badly. Eventually, another man appeared behind the security guard, and those two men began to attack this security guard to the point where he was knocked to the ground, and both of the men began to stomp all over his body, including his head. So we came to this platform in hopes that we would figure out where this surveillance image that was used to identify Chris, where that came from originally. One of the buses that was parked here, and we're right as we're standing here, and you can hear over here, there's buses parked here. We looked up on the bus, and there's a tiny little surveillance camera, probably no bigger than a $50 coin, pointed in the direction of these individuals. The surveillance image that they're relying on was these little tiny cameras that are hanging off of the side of the bus. We've been looking at this image a long time, and it's really hard to make out very much. As a figure of a man in a hooded winter coat, and he has a COVID mask kind of dangling down to his chin, and the quality of the image is so poor that I think it would be really even hard to identify the man, even if you knew him. There isn't much that's identifiable about who this person is. You know, a lot of people in the world of facial recognition and AI software say that the quality of the image that you run through these programs matters a great deal, and when you're talking about the accuracy of the results. And so, there's a concern that Christopher Gatlin's legal team has raised is that when you run this blurry image, you're going to get, lower accuracy results. And they think that that's what led to Chris Gatlin being misidentified by this software. And ultimately, the police ended up pursuing him because of that. Police had tried to figure out who these attackers were a few different ways. They canvassed homeless shelters. They asked the victim of the attack, who said he didn't remember much about the incident. They just didn't have any other leads at that point. So they put this image into a software system called the St. Louis Mugshot Recognition Technology System. This is a piece of software that scans for similar faces among the mugshots of hundreds of thousands of people who were arrested at some point in the St. Louis area, a population that is disproportionately Black. Chris likely had multiple mugshots in the system because he had been arrested for traffic violations as well as an alleged burglary. Prosecutors dropped that case because there wasn't enough evidence. The software spit out several mugshots that it determined most closely resembled the attackers on that train platform. Chris's was one of them, and detectives decided to focus on him, even though he had no apparent ties to the crime and no criminal record of violence. Spokespeople for the two agencies that investigated Chris, the St. Louis County Police and the St. Louis Metropolitan Police, both declined to comment. They said that this remains an active investigation. I called and knocked on the doors of the detectives who led the investigation. One of them declined to comment. The other never got back to me. We met with Chris in person because I wanted to hear more about his experience.
Good morning, how y'all doing?
Morning, good. How are you?
Doing all right.
Right away, I noticed that Chris is a very put-together guy. He's wearing a big, cool watch. He has a St. Louis baseball hat and a necklace. What does this say?
I am a child of God.
Okay. Is there any story behind that?
I came up in church. My granny had us in church. But when I got older, I stopped going. But I never stopped praying. Or I ain't lose faith. Because I know I'm a child of God.
Chris grew up in St. Louis, and he used to love it here.
It was fun. I had fun coming up as a kid. Just like when I got older, it seemed like everything got worse because the people started disappearing. The main ones that I really loved,
A lot of the people closest to him died in a short period of time. His grandmother, his nephew, the 2 mothers of his kids, and his mom. He had a lot of bad memories in St. Louis. And so he started spending more of his time at his dad's house in Kokomo, Indiana, about a 5-hour drive away. He had come back to the city for his mom's funeral and ended up staying for a few months. He was at his sister's house when officers knocked on his door out of the blue and arrested him for a crime that he says he had nothing to do with. I wanted to ask Chris what he thought about the match that this AI program had made between a blurry surveillance photo and his mugshot. I want to actually, can we look at this picture together? What are you thinking the first time you see that?
Dude, I laugh. Look, that's why they probably took me as a joke. I laugh. I said, man, look at him. Just look at the man.
What do you see?
Just look how he's dressed, though.
So the person in their surveillance image is wearing kind of a baggy, nondescript winter clothes, which is not how Chris is dressed at all and not how he says he dresses.
You wouldn't call me wearing no coat like that, no big pants like that. I ain't dusty. I be together when I come outside.
Yeah.
And then you look at him and look at me, we look nothing alike. Mm-hmm. Not at all. We just don't.
But the software said they looked alike, and the police believed the software. So they took Chris's mugshot and they went looking for someone who might be able to confirm his connection to the crime.
Hi, Michael. Nice to meet you, Michael. How did you even find out about this? This happened to me 4 years ago when I did security at the Metrolink, and this is the result of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Michael Feldman is the victim of that brutal attack at the Metro station.
I've been diagnosed. I have what's called post-concussion syndrome, and I was also diagnosed with a minor traumatic brain injury because of when I was on the ground. Whatever I got hit from behind, I was out. But I was going in and out of consciousness. Blood was everywhere.
Several months after the attack, 3 uniformed police officers showed up in the lobby of the building where he lived, and they seemed to have a new sense of urgency about solving their case. Michael told them the same thing he told us. He didn't remember the people who attacked him. He didn't remember the faces. He also told them that he didn't want to be the reason that an innocent person went to jail.
And they go, we want to just look at some photos. Do you remember what the guy looks like? It's like, you can show me photos all day long you want to, but I don't remember. I just don't remember. And I kept telling him that.
The police were there to conduct a photo lineup with Michael, and we learned about how it all went down from a body cam video that was recorded by one of the police at the scene.
And you think if you saw a picture, one would be my favorite? I can look at my memories.
In the video, you can see police handing Michael 6 photos of men and telling him to examine them.
Take a look through all of them and see if anything rings a bell.
He sort of spreads out the photos in front of him. And when he looked at the image of Chris, he initially set it to one side. And then he pointed to a photo of another man and said, I want to say it's him.
I want to say him. I don't remember. My memory is... I want to say maybe him.
But one of the officers urged him to kind of reconsider.
Okay, let's think about before the incident. You went up and you talked to him a little bit. Right.
The officer told him, think about the characteristics of the guy, his complexion. Did he have anything about his hair or the clothing he was wearing? And eventually, Michael came back to Chris's photo, tapped on it.
I think it's him. Okay. Good. All right. Here, use my pen. What I'd like you to do, since that's the guy you chose, just circle his picture. And then anywhere on that piece of paper, just sign your name.
When you tapped on the photograph of this guy, Chris Gatlin, who was the guy that they were investigating, one of the detectives said, okay, and directed you to sign your name and circle the defendant's picture.
I don't remember. I know he said, if this is the guy, this is the guy. I said, okay. But I said, I kept telling him, but I'm not going to put an innocent man in jail. I'm just not going to do that. You can talk to me all day long about that, I told him, but I'm not going to do that.
Can I ask you a hard question here, which is, if that's your position, why did you circle his picture?
Because it felt like they wanted me to pick something. I felt like I didn't remember what it looked like, and I felt like if I didn't pick somebody, but I didn't want to pick anybody.
5 days after that conversation with Michael, the police arrested Chris. He couldn't afford the $75,000 bond, so he just had to wait, sitting in a jail cell smaller than a parking space. After 6 months, Chris was sent home to wait for his trial there, but when he cut off his ankle monitor in a moment of panic, he was taken back to jail where he stayed another 10 months. Chris said it was hell sitting in jail for a crime that he says he didn't commit. He says all he could think about were his 4 kids and all the milestones and big days that he was missing with them.
The birthdays, the Christmas went past. You got Halloween, Valentine's Day for my daughter. Like everything, it was like everything. I just wanted to be with him.
For a long time, all there was to do was wait.
Every day I questioned myself. I did while I was in. I'm like, man, why I'm still here? But I finally gave in once I knew I wasn't going nowhere. I'm like, shit, I ain't going nowhere, so I might as well sit. Until whenever they gonna let me out, they gonna let me out. I just knew for a fact that I wasn't gonna plead guilty to nothing that I didn't do.
After the break, someone finally believes Chris, and we see how the policing practices that put him behind bars are happening all over the country. We'll be right back. Brooke Lima is a veteran public defender. She actually started her career in St. Louis. She spent a long time in Alaska, and she had actually just moved back to St. Louis when Chris Gatlin was arrested. Audio producer Emma Talkoff and I met with Brooke at a sushi restaurant and talked for over an hour about Chris's case. It really stood out to her because there were a lot of things that she had never encountered before.
I remember reading the police report and doing like a once over it and thinking, ooh, that sounds bad. And then like a light bulb in my head the following day, kind of, tugging at me. How did my guy even get involved as a name in all of this? But I went back and it just jumped off the page at me, the St. Louis mugshot recognition technology. And I thought, what is that?
One of the things that came up over and over in my reporting on facial recognition cases around the country is that police just often don't tell the public when it's used or even tell defendants when they use it to identify them. Often the police just say they use something like investigative techniques or something else vague like that to say that they identified the suspect without mentioning the software at all.
That's not something that I even knew existed. That was literally the first time I ever heard about anything like that. And so then I immediately just got on the internet and plugged that in, and that's when I first ran across the phrase facial recognition technology. And I just kind of got sucked into it because it seemed so outrageously dystopian to me.
How so?
That the government would rely on a machine to identify somebody as a potential suspect in a crime. And I thought, what do you actually know about this machine?
What do we know about this machine? The software works well in laboratory conditions, using a clear photo of someone's full face with good lighting. But police don't typically use it that way. Usually they're using lower quality photos taken with surveillance cameras at weird angles and poor lighting. We just don't know how accurate the software is in these conditions. We know of at least 8 people who have been wrongfully arrested due to misuse of facial recognition. All but 1 are Black. Federal testing has shown that some software is more likely to misidentify Asian and Black people and women. We spent time talking to all of the people we could find who were wrongfully arrested because of this technology.
I didn't expect my day to go like that at all.
Portia Woodruff was 8 months pregnant at the time she was arrested.
The morning that it happened, I was upstairs getting my youngest daughter ready for school. I was brushing her hair. My oldest daughter was looking for her school clothes, and I heard a knock at the door. When I opened the door, it was a lady officer at the door. She asked me what my name was. She asked me if I was Portia Woodruff, and I said, yeah, that's me. How can I help you? She said, oh, well, we have a warrant for your arrest. I'm like, warrant? What do you mean you have a warrant for my arrest?
Detroit police identified Portia using facial recognition software when they were investigating a carjacking incident that happened a few weeks before. Portia didn't know any of that. She said that on the morning she was arrested, her kids were scared and asking her what was happening.
I'm literally trying to pull myself together as a pregnant mom, as a pregnant woman, scared, distraught, out of my mind. I'm trying to pull myself together. I'm like, you guys, give me a second. Mom's just going to see what's going on. And once they handcuffed me, that was an embarrassment in itself. Pregnant, being handcuffed, my neighbors are there. It's police cars outside in the middle of the street. So that was a lot.
There are some real parallels in the stories of the people arrested in this way. In each of these cases, people described to me this horrible feeling inside of having no idea why they were arrested, and then this nightmare feeling of no one believing them when they said that they weren't the people in the photos.
It was just the thought process of like, oh my God, what is really going on? What's happening? Could this possibly make me have my son early, or something go wrong with my pregnancy? And it's like, okay, and if these people don't believe me, will I be in jail with my son?
The fact that police got their names from a computer almost made it seem like these people were presumed guilty. When I spoke with these people, I asked each one of them what it felt like to learn that facial recognition was part of the reason that they were arrested.
I've only ever seen it in Jason Bourne movies and stuff like that. I never really thought that they use it. I was baffled. Like, out of all the people this can happen to, it happens to me.
They lean on the technology because I think we are taught that computers don't make mistakes, humans do.
Now I'm sitting there like, how can you do this? You can't do this. Like, no way. How can you just put these charges on me? And I'm telling you that that's not me. But I know I was innocent, so how do I beat a machine?
That was Niger Parks, Robert Williams, and Alonzo Sawyer, 3 of the people who were wrongfully arrested. It's hard to know just how commonly this software is used. Most police departments aren't required to say that they use AI. I found records from 75 departments that use facial recognition. I reached out to all of them. Only about 24 shared detailed records. Looking into those reports, I found 15 departments had arrested suspects they identified through AI matches without any independent evidence connecting those people to crimes. Most of these police departments declined to answer my questions. Some claimed that their officers corroborate all AI matches, but they didn't provide any details or evidence to contradict what I saw in the reports. All of the 8 cases of wrongful arrests were eventually dismissed, but in each of those cases, the defendants had to work to clear their own names. It often came down to luck. For Portia Woodruff, the fact that she was 8 months pregnant proved she wasn't the person in the surveillance video.
The biggest thing for me is I could have lost my son, and even further than that, had I not been pregnant with my son, you wouldn't be sitting here speaking to me right now.
Many of these people said they got back their freedom because of little details. One defendant had a tattoo on his arm that the person in the surveillance image didn't. Another person had a mole on their face. One defendant found a photo of a receipt on his phone that proved he was miles away at the time the crime was committed. Chris Gatlin didn't have anything like that. His lawyer, Brooke, tried really hard to find something that would establish where Chris had been the time that the crime was committed, but a lot of time had passed. He was pretty sure he was sitting at home, and they couldn't find a way to prove that. She was trying for months to prove his innocence, when suddenly she found a piece of evidence that finally turned things around. It was the body cam footage of Michael identifying Chris's photo.
Once I saw that video, I'm like, oh, well, that's where I'm going to put my energy right now, because I might be able to persuade the judge.
We went to go see that judge in the county courthouse, a big government building with jail cells upstairs and courtrooms downstairs. So we are standing in front of the St. Louis County Jail, and this is where Christopher Gatlin ended up spending over 16 months. You know, he was never convicted of a crime, but yet he spent over a year here. The judge in his case was Brian May. This case was from a couple years ago, but he remembers seeing some of the evidence, like that picture that we looked at with Chris.
I just remember seeing it's funny how some things you recall, seeing like a still from the video of the
There is a still.
bus.
It's very blurry, though.
Right.
Yeah.
And it shows a guy like in a puffy blue, like down coat. And I think he might have had a hood up, African-American gentleman. And I think his face was kind of partially covered by the hood, if I recall.
Okay.
But what was interesting when I was watching it was I thought, wow, this video really isn't that good.
And he remembered that body cam footage of the officers conducting the photo lineup with Michael Feldman, the victim. That was the conversation where Michael said he felt like they were guiding him towards picking Chris, even though he kept telling them he didn't remember what the attacker looked like.
It was very clear to me that that's what I'm looking for. The way the ID was handled, I didn't think was necessarily appropriate. That was the key piece of evidence in the case, obviously.
The judge ruled to suppress that video, which means that even though Michael picked Chris out of a lineup, that couldn't be used as evidence against him. That was the only piece of evidence the police had against him, so prosecutors dropped the case. And after all that time, Chris went free. Like many of the people I talked to, Chris's freedom came down to finding just one key piece of evidence. That means there may be many more people out there in similar situations who were also identified by facial recognition technology, but who are still behind bars because they never found the evidence that proves that they were wrongfully arrested. Brooks says even though the improper handling of the lineup is why Chris's case was dropped, the use of AI and facial recognition was the heart of what went wrong in his case.
He wouldn't have been in the photo lineup if not for the facial recognition technology. Why would he have ever been in there? They had no reason to put his face in there.
People in law enforcement and people in the courts are still really grappling with what to do with this technology and how to treat the software results that come from facial recognition. On one hand, it has this seemingly miraculous power to help police solve these difficult cases where sometimes a video camera was the only witness to a crime. On the other hand, as I know from my reporting, it's just not reliable, and there's currently no way to know exactly how accurate or inaccurate facial recognition software is. Recently, Chris sued the county and the officers responsible for his arrest. He said his life has calmed down a bit. He gets to see his kids a lot, and he's happy staying far away from St. Louis now that his case is over. Back when I first spoke with Chris over Zoom, I asked him how going through all this had changed him.
You made me look at a lot of stuff different, for real, for real. It just showed me how quick you can lose your life. 5, 10, 4 minutes, 2 minutes. I literally just had walked in the door, and they came right and locked me up for something that I didn't even know what they was talking about. It was just crazy.
All of the people known to have been wrongfully arrested because of facial recognition said that these experiences left permanent scars, lost jobs, damaged relationships, missed payments on cars and home loans. Some said they had to send their kids to counseling to work through the trauma of watching mom or dad get arrested on the front lawn. I asked Chris whether he thought police should be allowed to use this technology at all.
They should be banned from using that because you can't just put no picture in the computer and then go off a scanner or whatever, however it go. I don't think that's right, though.
Several of the other people I spoke to, including Robert Williams, Karan Reed, and Alonzo Sawyer, said that they felt the same way.
If it's not working, why use it? If it worked at 100% accuracy, yes, I'd be fine with it. But it doesn't.
Something has to change because it can't just keep happening this way to where they're stopping people's lives because they don't want to do any police work or just because an app spits out my name and you don't do anything behind it. You can't just stop my life and then don't say anything about it.
You have this artificial intelligence, facial recognition stuff, but you got the old laws. You got to bring the laws up to speed with that. What laws do you have in place for that? You understand what I'm saying? Who's to say that is not going to happen to somebody else? Because you're so far advanced up here, you didn't bring the laws up with it to hold anybody accountable for locking you up. They just said, to hell with me. You can just take them days out of my life that I can't get back.
This episode was reported by Doug McMillan, an investigative reporter for The Post, and Emma Talkoff, a producer for Post Reports. It was also produced by Trinity Webster Bass and edited by Maggie Penman and Evelyn LaRubia. It was mixed by Sam Baer. Thanks also to David Ovalle and Aaron Schaefer. That's it for Post Reports. Thanks for listening. I'm Elahe Izadi. We'll be back tomorrow with more stories from The Washington Post.